My name is Elena Cruz and I am 29 years old. The text message arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Friday, right as I was reviewing the final seating chart for the Children's Care Justice Network annual gala. 700 confirmed guests, 40 corporate sponsors, 2 governors, 3 state senators, and the lieutenant governor seated exactly where protocol demanded. Every chair mattered. Every name carried weight. I had spent weeks perfecting this chart because tonight wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a statement. My phone buzzed. Don't come to the family reunion tomorrow. Isabel's boyfriend is State Senator Andrew Cole. We need to impress him. Your nonprofit work would complicate things. Hope you understand. Dad, I stared at the message longer than necessary, not because it shocked me, not because it hurt, but because after 12 years of relentless work, my father still thought I had a nice little charity job. I wasn't angry. I was finished. I typed one word. Okay. What my family didn't know, what they had never once asked, was that State Senator Andrew Cole was the keynote speaker at my gala that very same night, held at the same country club where they were planning their reunion. Same building, same evening, different worlds. And Senator Cole would be sitting at my table. Being the middle child in the Cruz family meant learning how to disappear quietly. My older sister Isabel had always been the star. Homecoming queen, sorority president, married wealthy at 23, divorced by 25. Now dating a state senator at 28, my younger brother Mateo was the pride college athlete, full scholarship, now a familiar face on local sports television, and me. Elena is more of a thinker. My mother liked to say at family gatherings, the way someone might describe a reliable but unexciting appliance. When I was 16 and said I wanted to work in nonprofit advocacy, my father laughed. Those jobs don't pay anything. Be practical. Maybe teaching. Or marry well, Isabel added casually, inspecting her nails. That's always an option. I stopped sharing my dreams after that. At 18 I started volunteering at a children's hospital, a few hours a week between classes, reading stories to kids in oncology, helping parents navigate medical paperwork designed to exhaust them. One afternoon, a mother grabbed my hand in the hallway. You saved us, she cried. We were about to lose our house paying for treatment. You didn't give up on us. That moment rewired something in me. I transferred universities, double majored in public policy and social work. Worked 3 jobs to survive because my father said, we already helped Isabel with college. Mateo had his athletic scholarship. I was told I'd figure it out. And I did. I graduated with honors at 22 and took a job at a small advocacy nonprofit earning $31,000 a year. My family congratulated me the way people congratulate someone for trying. That's nice, Mija. My mother said at dinner. But when will you get a real career? Isabel, planning her second wedding at the time, patted my hand. It's sweet that you want to help people, but you also need to think about your future. I smiled. I was thinking about it. They just didn't know how far ahead I already was. At 23, I founded Children's Care Justice Network. It started with a $50,000 grant I wrote myself while working nights from midnight to 4 a.m. for 6 straight weeks. I lived in a studio apartment, drove a 12-year-old car, ate ramen more nights than I care to admit. My family never asked about it. At Sunday dinners, conversation revolved around Isabel's new relationship and Mateo's rising fame. When it turned to me, it was always the same. Elena still works at that children's charity. That's I got by 25. CCJN had 15 employees and a $2.1 million operating budget. By 27, we had offices across 5 regions and partnerships with every major hospital system in the state. We changed policy. We erased medical debt. We saved families from losing everything while their children fought to live. I upgraded my wardrobe because donors took me more seriously when I looked successful. At one family dinner, Isabel noticed my suit. Finally shopping somewhere decent, she said. Did you get a raise at the charity? Something like that, I replied. Dad nodded without looking up from his phone. Maybe now you can afford a house. I already owned one, paid in full. I didn't mention it. Now, at 29, my name sat printed at the head of a gala seating chart, Elena Cruz, Founder and Executive Director CCJN across from me, State Senator Andrew Cole, a man I'd worked with for 3 years. A man who respected my work. A man who had no idea my family thought I was an embarrassment. At 6:30 p.m., he would arrive early to review his speech with me. At 7:00 p.m., my family would walk into the same building. Having made sure I wasn't invited, I straightened the seating chart and smiled. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with silence, patience, and letting people finally see exactly what they chose to ignore. By 5:00 p.m., the country club looked exactly the way it was supposed to: expensive, polished, untouchable. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the grand ballroom, where round tables draped in ivory linens waited patiently for 700 guests who believed they were coming to make a difference. Centerpieces of white roses and blue hydrangeas lined the room. The stage stood ready, our CCJN logo projected behind the podium like a quiet promise. Next door, separated by nothing but a wall and a hallway, was the smaller ballroom, colorful balloons, a vinyl banner reading CRUZ FEMILRNON 2026, lauder already echoing. 2 events. 2 realities. 1 building. I checked in with the event coordinator, confirmed the photographers' positions, reviewed the program one last time. Everything was running perfectly. At 5:45, I changed into my gown, a midnight, blue floor-length dress that cost more than my first car. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. Tonight mattered. At 6:15, I stood in the lobby greeting early arrivals when I heard a familiar voice drift through the marble hall. "This place is gorgeous," my mother said, eye unmistakable. "I can't believe Isabel's boyfriend is a state senator." "Just act normal," Isabel hissed. "Please don't embarrass me." I stepped back into the grand ballroom before they could see me. At 6:30 sharp, Senator Andrew Cole arrived. "Elena," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "This looks incredible. You've outdone yourself. Thank you, Senator. We're projecting 6.3 million tonight." He whistled softly. "That's remarkable." He loosened his tie. "I should mention, I'm bringing a guest. My girlfriend. I cleared it with your office." "Of course," I said smoothly. "She's seated next to you. She's around here somewhere with her family." He added, checking his watch. "I'll go find her and bring her in before seating." "Take your time," I replied. "We don't begin until 7. He headed toward the lobby. I exhaled slowly and went to check on the kitchen. By 6:45, guests were arriving in earnest. Corporate executives, philanthropists, the lieutenant governor herself, everyone dressed to impress, everyone ready to be seen. At 6:55, the coordinator whispered, 5 minutes. At 6:57, I took my seat at the head table. At 6:59, the ballroom doors opened for final seating. And then, Senator Cole walked in. With Isabel on his arm. She looked stunning, of course. A red dress that hugged confidence she'd worn her entire life. Perfect hair. Diamonds at her throat that once cost more than my annual salary. They approached the head table. The coordinator checked the place cards. Senator Cole pulled out Isabel's chair, then glanced at the card beside him. Elnet KRUZ, FONDR and XKIDUDOR CCJN. He froze. Slowly, he looked up. Our eyes met. The color drained from his face. "Elena," he said, voice unsteady. You're Elena Cruz." Isabel turned. Her smile vanished. Her mouth fell open. "Hello, Senator," I said calmly. "Isabel, I'm so glad you could join us tonight." "You," Isabel whispered. "You run this." "I founded it," I replied. 12 years ago. The room seemed to tilt. Senator Cole lowered himself into his chair, still staring. "Isabel," he said slowly, "your sister is the Elena Cruz. The one who wrote the Children's Medical Debt Relief Act." The lieutenant governor leaned toward me. "Elena, everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," I said with a polite smile. "Just family catching up?" Isabel couldn't speak. "I thought," she finally managed. "I thought you worked at a small nonprofit." "She does," the senator said sharply. "She runs the most influential children's advocacy organization in this state." He turned to me. "They didn't know. They never asked," I said simply. The donation tracker flickered on the screens around the room, numbers already climbing. Senator Cole stood abruptly. "Excuse me." He walked away, phone already in hand. Isabel leaned toward me, panic breaking through her composure. Elena, you have to understand. We didn't mean. My father texted me today, I said quietly. Told me not to come to the reunion because my work would embarrass you in front of your impressive boyfriend. Her face went white. You told him that? I continued. About the same man I've been working with for 3 years. The same man speaking here tonight. Oh my God, she whispered. Senator Cole returned, jaw tight. I just spoke to your father, he said. He told me you worked at nice little charity. Said there must be a mistake. That you couldn't possibly be important enough to host something like this. Silence wrapped the head table. I told him. The senator continued, voice controlled but furious, that his daughter has changed state policy, helped thousands of families, and done more for children in this state than most elected officials do in a lifetime. Isabel's mascara began to run. I told him. Senator Cole finished. That I was honored to be here, and deeply disappointed in any family that could be so blind. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. The program starts in 3 minutes. He nodded, sat down, hands shaking slightly. The lights dimmed. Our board chair approached the podium, and as the first applause rose, I caught Isabel's reflection in the polished table. A woman finally realizing that the sister she dismissed had been standing in the spotlight all along. The lights softened as the room settled into silence. 700 people. Crystal glasses stilled. Every eye turned toward the stage. I stood and walked to the podium with the calm confidence that only comes from knowing exactly why you are there. Not to prove anything. Not to impress anyone. But to do the work. Good evening, I began. Thank you for being here, for choosing to stand with children and families when they need it most. The first donation number flickered onto the screen behind me. No 250,000. I spoke about 4,912 families we had served this year alone. Parents who had faced impossible choices between rent and treatment. Children whose lives were saved because bureaucracy didn't win. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. From the corner of my vision, I could see Isabel at the head table, hands clenched, shoulders tight, trying to disappear in a way she never had before. Senator Cole sat beside her, posture stiff, his warmth reserved entirely for the work unfolding in front of him. The first video played. A mother on screen. A small boy with a shaved head. A story of debt erased and dignity restored. The audience leaned forward as one. When the lights came back up, the donation total had doubled. Then it was time. The event coordinator nodded. I returned to my seat. Senator Andrew Cole rose and walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone and looked out over the room. Good evening, he said. I'm State Senator Andrew Cole, and I'm honored to be here tonight in support of the Children's Care Justice Network. Polite applause followed. Then he paused. But I'll be honest, he continued, his voice shifting. Earlier today, I didn't fully understand the significance of this moment. The room grew still. He gestured toward me. Elena Cruz founded CCJN 12 years ago with a 50,000 grant and a belief that no family should be financially destroyed because their child got sick. The applause grew louder. In 12 years, he went on, she has built an organization that has helped nearly 5,000 families, rewritten healthcare policy, and secured millions in funding for children who would otherwise be invisible. He looked directly at me. Elena Cruz wrote the Children's Medical Debt Relief Act. Her research, her advocacy, her refusal to accept no is why that bill passed. Thunderous applause erupted. I kept my expression composed, professional. This night wasn't about ego, but behind the calm my heart pounded. Then his voice changed. But here's what struck me most tonight, he said slowly. I spoke earlier with someone who didn't know what Elena had built. A ripple moved through the room. Someone who thought she worked at a nice little charity. Someone who had no idea that the woman they dismissed as doing sweet, but not serious work, had actually created one of the most impactful advocacy organizations in this state. Isabel sank lower in her chair. It made me realize how often we do this, he continued. How often we decide someone isn't important because their success doesn't look the way we expect. The ballroom was silent. We dismissed the quiet ones. The builders. The people who don't demand applause but change systems instead. He paused, letting the words land. Alana Cruz doesn't chase headlines. She chases results. She doesn't build a personal brand, she builds lifelines. The donation total surged again. Because of her work, he said. Over 300 families this year alone walked away from crushing medical debt. Children got treatment. Parents kept their homes. He lifted his gaze. And yet, she didn't need recognition to do any of it. The audience rose to its feet. A standing ovation that rolled through the ballroom like thunder. I stood as well, nodding my thanks. Meeting the eyes of donors, advocates, families. People who understood the weight of what was being said. From the corner of my vision, I saw Isabel crying openly now. Her carefully constructed image cracked beyond repair. Senator Cole returned to the table. He didn't sit beside her. He took the empty seat on my other side. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her, voice low but final. "I can't be with someone who diminishes what matters." She bolted from the room. No one followed during the silent auction. My phone lit up. "Dad, we need to talk. Now." "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "Mateo, what the hell? Elena?" Aunts, cousins. Messages stacking. I turned the phone face down. The lieutenant governor approached me, wine glass in hand. "That was quite a moment," she said lightly. "Family trouble. Family dynamics," I replied. She smiled knowingly. "The people who don't ask don't deserve to know." Then she leaned in. "I reviewed CCJN's funding proposal for next year. Brilliant work. Let's meet next week." I smiled. I'd be honored. By the end of the night, the final number appeared on the screen. 6.9 million raised. A new record. As guests filtered out, Senator Cole found me near the stage. "I'm sorry for the scene," he said. "That was personal." "You spoke from the truth," I replied. "That's what mattered." He nodded. "I ended things with her." "You don't owe me explanations," I said gently. "I want you to know," he said, "your work matters. You matter. I'm sorry your family couldn't see it." "They're starting to," I said quietly. I left the country club just before midnight. Exhausted, grounded, unshaken, because the real victory wasn't the applause or the viral speech. It was knowing that I had built something unbreakable. While everyone thought I was just working at a nice little charity. I left the country club at 11:58 p.m. The parking lot was nearly empty. The kind of quiet that follows something historic, when the noise has burned itself out, and all that's left is aftermath. I sat in my car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, letting my breath catch up with my body. We had done it. 6.9 million raised. More families helped. More lives changed. My phone vibrated again. Not yet. When I finally did, the screen was chaos. 63 missed calls, 127 unread messages. All from people who had finally realized I existed. I started the engine and drove home. At 12:14 a.m. my phone rang again. "Dad," I let it ring twice. Then I answered. "Hello, Alina." His voice sounded tight, controlled, like someone trying not to lose their balance. "We need to talk about why you didn't tell us," he said. I smiled faintly, eyes on the road. "No," I replied calmly. "You need to talk about why you never asked." Silence. "In 12 years, I continued, how many times did you ask what CCJN actually does? How many times did you ask about our budget, our staff, our policy work?" He didn't answer. "We have 43 employees," I said. 5 regional offices. We helped 412 families this year alone. We've changed 6 state healthcare policies. You testified before Congress," he asked, stunned. "Twice," I said. 3 years ago. And last year." Another silence. "You texted me today," I went on, "and told me not to come to the family reunion because my work would embarrass you in front of Isabel's boyfriend." "That's not what we meant." "You meant exactly what you said," I replied. "You were embarrassed by me." His breath hitched. When I pulled into my driveway, I stayed in the car. "Dad," I said softly, "tell me 3 things about my life you know because you asked. Not because you overheard or found out by accident." 30 seconds passed. Then 45. Then a full minute. "That's what I thought," I said gently. "I don't need you to suddenly be proud of me because a senator gave a speech and the internet is watching. I needed you to be interested when it was just me. Doing work I believed in. Elena. His voice cracked. We failed you. Yes, I said. You did. But I succeeded anyway. I hung up. The next morning, Isabel called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Richard broke up with me, she sobbed. He said he can't be with someone who treats her family the way I treated you. I'm sorry you're hurting, I said honestly. Are you? She snapped. Because it feels like you planned all of this to humiliate me. I laughed once, no humor in it. I planned my annual gala for 11 months. I said. You dating the keynote speaker was coincidence. You showing up at my event was coincidence. The only thing you planned was excluding me. She was quiet. I didn't know it was this big, she whispered. You never asked. I replied. You've spent 12 years calling it my little charity. I continued. Don't blame me because your assumptions collapsed in public. She cried harder. I lost him because of this. No, I said firmly. You lost him because when you realized I'd built something real, your first emotion wasn't pride. It was embarrassment. She had no answer. 3 weeks passed. Then Dad called again. I read the annual report, he said quietly. All of it. Then the articles, the profiles, the testimony transcripts. I waited. I don't know you, he admitted. And I think that's why you're angry? That's a start, I said. Can we meet? He asked. Just coffee, no apologies, no speeches. I thought about it. 1 hour, I said. Next Sunday. Sunday morning I arrived early. Dad showed up on time looking older, somehow smaller. We sat. When did you realize you didn't know me? I asked. He stared into his coffee. When I called your office, he said. Asked to speak to you. Your receptionist didn't know I was your father. My chest tightened. You never talked about us, he continued. We weren't part of your life. You never asked to be, I said gently. He nodded. I assumed, he said. You assumed quiet meant unsuccessful, I replied. I was wrong. I took a sip of my drink. I collect vintage campaign buttons, I said. I have over 300. I foster senior dogs. I'm learning piano badly. He smiled through tears. I didn't know any of that. You do now. We talked for 2 hours. Not forgiveness. 6 months later, CCJN celebrated its 13th anniversary. We secured a 12 million state contract. My parents attended, awkward, trying. Dad volunteers with our fundraising database now. Mom runs a family support group. Isabel is still in therapy. Progress is slow, but it's real. A mother approached me at the celebration. CCJN saved our home, she said. You personally stayed on the phone with me for 90 minutes. Dad overheard. Watched her hug me. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Thank you, I replied. But I didn't build this for your pride, he nodded. I know, he said. That's why it matters. And for the first time, the silence between us wasn't empty. People assumed the hardest part was over once the gala ended. That the applause, the viral speech, and the sudden respect repaired everything that had been broken. They were wrong. Being underestimated doesn't end the moment you're finally seen. It leaves scars, quiet ones. In the weeks after the gala, my name became familiar in rooms it had never entered before. Invitations poured in, panels, interviews, closed-door meetings with policymakers who had once ignored my emails. The world hadn't changed. Their perception had, and that realization stung more than it satisfied. My phone rang constantly. People who had never returned calls before suddenly wanted quick conversations. Donors who had once dismissed CCJN as too idealistic now called it visionary. I took the meetings. Not for validation, for the children. Still, I couldn't ignore the irony. The same work. The same outcomes. The same organization. Only now it had a spotlight. At home, the messages kept coming. Family group chats I'd muted years ago buzzed back to life. Aunt Rose off. We always knew you'd do something special. Cousin Mateo, I told people you were smart. I didn't respond. Because none of them had been there when I was sleeping 4 hours a night. eating noodles, writing grant proposals they never got answered. They weren't there when success was invisible. Isabel called again. This time, her voice was quieter. I started therapy, she said. Richard leaving made me realize I don't like who I've been. That's good, I replied, meaning it. I keep thinking, she continued, about all the times I talked over you. Diminished you. I didn't rescue her from the discomfort. Silence does more teaching than reassurance ever could. Can we meet? She asked. Not to fix things. Just to listen. I considered it. In a few months, I said. When you're doing the work for yourself, not to ease guilt, she agreed. That was new. Dad changed too. Slowly. Unevenly. He started sending me articles, awkwardly highlighted, over-explained. I read this and thought of you. He texted once. I smiled. Not because it erased what matters. At work, nothing slowed. Children still got sick. Families still faced impossible choices. One afternoon, I took a call from a mother in tears. They're threatening foreclosure, she said. I don't know what else to do. I stayed on the phone with her for 90 minutes. We filed appeals, pulled emergency funds, bought time. That night, I thought about how many times people had asked if my job was worth it, as if worth was measured in a 10. Underestimation costs you. It costs energy you spend proving yourself instead of resting. It costs relationships built on false hierarchies. It costs years of invisibility, but it also teaches something powerful: self-trust. When no one is clapping, you learn to get on. 3 months later, CCJN was awarded another policy grant. The press release went viral again. My assistant director laughed. Funny how they're all discovering you now. They didn't discover me, I said. Isabel and I met for coffee 6 months after the gala. She arrived without makeup, without armor. I brought you something, she said, sliding a small box across the table. Inside was a vintage campaign button, one I'd been searching for years. I listened, she said. I really did. I mad more than apologies. One evening, Dad and I stayed late at the office organizing donor files. I thought success looked loud, he admitted. Money, applause, status. And now, I asked. He looked around, at the families, at the systems you changed. He paused. That was no. The cost of being underestimated is steep, but the reward. Building something so solid that recognition becomes optional. I had built CCJN in silence. And now, even when the world finally noticed, I knew who I was without them. Fame, even the quiet kind, has a price. 6 months after the gala, CCJN stood at a crossroads I hadn't anticipated so soon. The invitations hadn't stopped, if anything. They'd intensified. National foundations, corporate partnerships, a proposal from a major healthcare conglomerate that promised 8 figures and instant expansion. On paper, it was everything we were supposed to want. In reality, it asked for something I wasn't sure I was willing to give. The meeting took place in a glass tower downtown. 3 executives. Perfect suits, perfect smiles. They praised our impact, quoted our statistics, called our work disruptive and scalable. Then came the condition. They wanted CCJN to shift focus. Policy work is controversial, one of them said carefully. Would prefer you concentrate on direct aid. It's cleaner. Less political. I leaned back in my chair. You want us to stop challenging the system that creates the debt in the first place, I said. Another executive smiled. We want to help families without upsetting powerful stake limits. There it was help, but only within stake limits. That night, I sat alone in my office long after everyone left. The offer could triple our budget overnight. Open offices in 5 more states, help thousands more families immediately. But it would silence us. I thought about the nights I'd spent writing legislation proposals no one read. The hearings where I testified to half-empty rooms, the families who didn't just need relief, but change. I slept on the office couch. By morning, the decision was clear. I'm turning it down. I told the board. Silence followed. Are you sure? One member asked. This could secure CCJN forever, or compromise it, I replied. We weren't built to be comfortable. They trusted me. That trust was heavy. The conglomerate didn't take the rejection quietly. 2 weeks later, a reporter called. I'm hearing CCJN is difficult to work with, she said. That your anti-business. I smiled faintly. We're anti-exploitation, I corrected. The article ran anyway. The implication wasn't. The pressure escalated. A state contract was suddenly delayed. A donor withdrew support without explanation. I recognized the pattern. Punishment disguised as logistics. Dad worried. You could lose everything? He said. I know, I replied. But you won't change, he added. No, I said. Isabel surprised me again. She showed up at the office with lunch one afternoon. I've been reading about nonprofit ethics, she said awkwardly. What they're doing to you. It's wrong. It wasn't absolution. But it was growth. The breaking point came during a public health summit. I was scheduled to speak on a panel about medical debt reform. The night before, I received an email. We recommend adjusting your remarks to avoid alienating potential partners. I stared at the screen. Then I closed my laptop. The next day I spoke anyway. I talked about families choosing between insulin and rent, about hospitals suing parents, about policy failures in what it named. The room was tense, then it erupted in applause, not polite. That night my inbox flooded. Grassroots organizations, small donors, advocacy groups. One message stood out. We heard you didn't sell out. We want to help. Within a month we replaced the lost funding. Not with one massive check, but with thousands of smaller ones stronger. Clino now. At our annual strategy retreat, I stood before the team. This is the choice, I said. Growth without a soul, or impact with integrity. They chose integrity, every time. Late one evening, Dad called. I was wrong about what success costs, he said. Sometimes it costs opportunity. And sometimes, I replied, it costs silence. He laughed softly. I'm proud of you, he said. This time, it felt earned. Now the choice changed everything, not because it made life easier, but because it proved something I'd always known. Revenge doesn't always look like humiliation. Sometimes, it looks like refusing to become what they expected you to be. The backlash didn't arrive loudly. It came quietly, through closed doors, canceled meetings, and polite smiles that never reached the eyes. For weeks after the summit, I could feel it. The shift. The subtle distancing from people who had once leaned in eagerly. I had crossed an invisible line. The one you're not supposed to cross when you stop being useful and start being honest. And that, I realized, was the truth they never expected me to tell. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. A private roundtable. Industry leaders, policy advisors. The kind of room where decisions are shaped before the public ever hears about them. I accepted. Not because I trusted them, but because I trusted myself. The room was small, controlled, carefully curated. A man at the head of the table smiled warmly. We admire your passion, he said, but passion needs refinement. I nodded. Truth often does, after people hear it. A few chairs shifted. Would like you to consider a broader perspective, another added. Medical debt is complicated. So are lives, I replied. That hasn't stopped families from losing theirs. Silence followed. They weren't used to being spoken to that way. One executive leaned forward. You've become influential, he said. You could do a lot of good, if you chose cooperation. There it was again, the offer disguised as advice. And if I don't? I asked. He smiled. Influential. I smiled back. So's reputation. The meeting ended. 2 days later, a report surfaced online. Anonymous sources. Carefully worded doubts, questions about CCJN's transparency, concerns about leadership style. I read it once, then closed the tab. This wasn't about facts. The board panicked. What if donors pull out? One member asked. Then we tell the truth, I said. And if that's not enough, then we keep telling it, I replied. So we did. We released our full financials. Again, open our internal processes. Invited independent auditors, not defensively confident. A journalist reached out. Not the kind who quotes headlines, but the kind who reads footnotes. She spent weeks embedded with us. She talked to families, staff, volunteers. When her piece was published, it didn't shout, it didn't need to. The truth stood on its own. The calls changed. Donors returned, different ones this time. Educators, nurses, small business owners, people who recognized integrity because they let it do day. Then came the call I didn't expect. Isabel's voice was steady. I want to say something publicly, she said. About how I treated you. About what I didn't see. You don't owe me that? I said. I know, she replied. That's why I want to do it. She wrote an op-ed about bias, about dismissing quiet competence, about unlearning superiority. It went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. At a community forum weeks later, a young woman approached me. I thought I had to be louder to matter, she said. Then I watched you. I hugged her. That's the lie they sell, I said softly. Dad attended the forum. Watched the crowd listen, not out of obligation, but respect. They can't touch you now, he said afterward. I replied. The truth they never expected wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about refusing to shrink when pressure demanded it. About choosing alignment over approval. About understanding that power doesn't always announce itself. It builds quietly. One night I stood alone in the CCJM office. The walls held framed letters from families, handwritten notes, crayon drawings. This was the truth, not headlines, not whispers. I turned off the lights and locked the door. Because the final reckoning wasn't public. It was personal. And it was complete power doesn't arrive the way movies promise. There was no final confrontation, no dramatic apology tour, no moment where everyone suddenly understood. Instead, power arrived quietly, on a Tuesday morning, when I realized I no longer felt the need to explain myself. The year after the summit was the most productive in CCJN's history. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, the most effective. We expanded into 3 new states using community-based partnerships instead of corporate sponsorships. Smaller budgets, greater trust, fewer compromises. Families didn't know my name. They didn't need to. They knew we answered the phone. One afternoon, while reviewing case files, I came across a familiar name. The mother I'd stayed on the phone with for 90 minutes months earlier. Her debt had been fully erased. Her home secured. Her son in remission. At the bottom of the file, she'd written a note. You never treated us like a problem to be solved. You treated us like people. That was the aftermath that mattered. Isabel continued therapy. We didn't become close, we didn't need to. At a family gathering months later, she introduced me differently. This is my sister, she said. She leads a nonprofit that changes healthcare policy. No qualifiers, no shrinking language, just truth. That was enough. Dad changed in quieter ways. He stopped interrupting, started listening. At a fundraising dinner, someone asked him what I did. He smiled and said, "Should build systems that protect families and not prodigal." One evening, long after the office emptied, I walked through the CCJN halls. Every wall held history, failures, revisions, growth earned the hard way. I thought about the younger version of myself, the one who wasn't invited, the one who was dismissed, the one who learned to be self-sufficient because no one else offered support. She would be proud. Not because we won, but because we never became small to survive. The media attention fade as it always does. But something else remained. Stability. Clarity. Peace. Peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from understanding yourself. At our annual retreat, I stood before the team one last time that year. Revenge, I said, is often imagined as humiliation. They nodded. But real revenge, I continued, is building a life so aligned with your values that the people who doubted you lose relevance. Silence followed. Not discomfort. Recognition. Later that night, I received a message from a young nonprofit founder. They keep calling my work cute. What should I do? I smiled and typed back, let them. Just don't let them stop you. On the anniversary of the gala, I didn't attend any events. I took the day off, walked through a park, sat with a book, watched the city move around me. Power had stopped feeling like resistance. It felt like choice. The invitation that once excluded me no longer mattered. The rooms that once dismissed me no longer defined me. I had learned something no one could take away. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need validation to be real. You don't need revenge when peace arrives first. And the greatest aftermath of all, I stopped measuring my life by who finally noticed, and started measuring it by who was helped. That was the ending they never expected. But it was exactly the one I chose.